acknowledge that this training program is sponsored by the Rotary International Foundation Global Grant on continuing professional education for physical therapists to improve physical therapy services in Vietnam. Additionally, I would like to acknowledge the collaborators, especially School and Graduate Institute of Physical Therapy at National Taiwan University for the support of this course. I'm Ya-Yong Lee, and I'm currently an associate professor working at the National Taiwan University School and Graduate Institute of Physical Therapy. For today's content, we are going to first talk about the introduction of systematic review and meta-analysis. Then I will tell you how to critically appraise articles of systematic review and meta-analysis. Lastly, I will brief about how to read a forest plot, which is often seen in a meta-analysis study. Let's first talk about systematic review and meta-analysis. This is the evidence pyramid for interventional studies. In our previous class, we have talked about each of the study design within the pyramid. And we have also talked about how to critically appraise a randomized control trial. And today we are going to focus on the topics of the pyramid and talk about systematic reviews and meta-analysis. What is a systematic review? A systematic review is a secondary analysis of original individual studies and draw a conclusion based on the cumulative weight of the evidence about the management of element of interest. So as we said, this is a secondary analysis, and a systematic review must contain multiple studies. When we talk about multiple, we are talking about more than 5 studies, sometimes 10, and in some topic that is really popular, we might see a systematic review that included more than 50 articles, even hundreds, and that means multiple studies. A systematic review is to gather those studies together with a similar topic and conduct a secondary analysis and provide a qualitative summary of the result. So the author of the systematic review would gather those original articles and then do some vote counting and say, based on the results of these articles, we propose that this intervention is effective or not effective. So a systematic review would highlight a discussion related to the main differences between studies and provide a better source of evidence. As mentioned in the previous slide, systematic review is to provide a qualitative judgment through the method of vote counting. So for example, if we look at the topic and trying to determine whether a certain intervention can reduce fall risk for elderly, and we found 10 articles related to this topic, then we will reduce the question of utility down to yes-no answer. And if those 10 articles, 7 showed positive effect and show that the intervention can reduce fall risk, while 3 articles show that there's no significant differences or no effect, then through vote counting, we can get the conclusion that 70% of the articles showed a positive effect, suggesting that this intervention may be effective to reduce fall risk of elderly. In addition, systematic review would describe the potential bias in the review process. And there are a lot of bias that may occur, which we will discuss a little bit more in the critical appraisal part. Most importantly, the purpose of a systematic review is to suggest a clinical practice guideline for future research directions. As an example, we give you when we searched through the articles and we found that 70% of the articles showed a positive effect of a certain intervention to reduce fall risk for elderly. Then for the clinical practice guideline, we can suggest that clinicians may use this kind of intervention to reduce falling of elderly in the future. In addition, through the review, we might find some insufficiency in the study design, and that's a resource for future research directions. And since systematic review can only provide a qualitative judgment through vote counting, it's still not objective enough. So statisticians and researchers have designed another kind of study that use quantitative method to draw conclusion, and that kind of study is called meta-analysis. Meta in the Greek form, it means change, transformation, or follow something in a series. So meta-analysis basically is the analysis of analysis. It's a statistical procedure to pull data together from each individual study and create a larger sample size to draw a more conclusive conclusion. And so that's why meta-analysis is at the toppest level of the pyramid, because it has greater power with larger sample size to detect differences in treatment effect. So when is meta-analysis useful? It is especially useful when there are several studies with conflicting results. It is possible that 6 studies showed positive, while 4 showed negative, and it is not clear whether it is really positive or not. Then at that time, meta-analysis is a good way to go. It is also useful when several studies are having small sample sizes. As we have mentioned in our previous course, conducting a randomized controlled trial is really hard, and there are a lot of reasons for the researchers not able to recruit a large sample of subjects. Therefore, it is important that if we could gather all these studies together and then do another analysis, which is meta-analysis, and then to increase the sample size in order to have a greater power to draw a conclusion. And meta-analysis, the advantage of meta-analysis, including that it could combine the results from multiple studies in order to assess clinical effectiveness, and it is a more precise estimate. It's also more economical. As we have mentioned again in our previous course, a randomized controlled trial would need to spend millions of dollars to conduct all through a period of 5 or 10 years. And when there are multiple small randomized controlled trials, a meta-analysis only need to conduct it by 1 or 2 researchers can gather those information together and then draw a more conclusive conclusion. Thus, it is a more economic method to know whether a certain intervention is effective or not. Here are the steps to perform systematic review and meta-analysis. First of all, you need to identify your research question. You need to formulate the objective of your review. What are you interested in? What do you want to look for? That would be your objective. Then the authors need to complete a very comprehensive literature search throughout multiple databases in order to make sure that they have included every research possible that is related to your topic. Then the authors will identify the study selection criteria. They will need to identify whether they want to include every study they searched, or they only want to include a randomized controlled trial, or they could also accept non-controlled trials. So the authors first need to identify study selection criteria. Of course, if you only included studies with a higher level within the pyramid, then the result you get from those studies are also at a more rigorous level and at a higher quality. Next, the authors will assess the quality of the design and method, give it a score based on some scoring system. Usually at this part, there will be 2 or more, sometimes I could see 3 reviewers, and each of them will give each individual article a score. And then if they found that the scoring is different, then a consensus meeting is needed to discuss whether you think this study get that score or not. And then they will provide a quality score. Also, they will give a predetermined cutoff point. Like, I will only include studies that have a Pedro score greater than 6 or not. So this scoring system or the scoring process is pretty important in the systematic review and meta-analysis process. Then the authors will get a result of each study, and then they will put those studies into a common matrix or pulling the data together. If they just put the study into a table and then look through the table through vote counting, then it would be a systematic review that's reading the data through a qualitative summary. But if they do another data analysis or statistic method to pull the data together, then they are providing a quantitative summary, and that is meta-analysis. So basically, if it is a meta-analysis study, it must include a systematic review first and then meta-analysis. But a systematic review does not have to have the meta-analysis process. Lastly, the authors will test overall significance and make some discussion, draw a conclusion based on their review or analysis, and then recommendations for clinical practice or future research direction. Okay, so now you understand what a systematic review is or meta-analysis, and now we are going to talk about how to critically appraise articles of systematic review and meta-analysis. There are 6 questions that we need to look through in order to determine the study credibility. First, did the investigator limit the review to high-quality studies? Second, did the investigator implement a comprehensive search and study selection process? Third, did the investigators assess the quality of individual studies with standardized process and or tools? Fourth, did the investigators provide details about the research validity or quality of studies included in the review? Fifth, did the investigator address publication bias? Sixth, if this is a meta-analysis, did the investigators use individual subject data in the analysis? The first question to look for study credibility is to determine whether the authors limit the review to high-quality studies. This question reflects the importance of using study designs in which bias is minimized. As we have reviewed from the evidence of pyramid, we know from interventional studies, randomized control trials have a higher level of evidence and higher quality in comparison to quasi-experimental or non-experimental designs. Therefore, the author should clearly point out the different study design included in their review and provide the rationale for that decision. It is possible that for some topic, a lot of randomized control trial has been conducted. Therefore, the author could easily limit their review into randomized control trial and only review those articles that is well conducted with high quality of study design. However, there is some possibility that the topic is pretty rare and there are not as much randomized control trial as the author wishes. So it is possible that for that kind of study, for example, for rare disease or for intervention that is pretty novel, it is possible that the author may include not only randomized control trial, but also quasi-experimental or non-experimental design. And that's okay, as long as the author clearly point out why they want to include those different study design and then provide the rationale for that decision, then that will meet the criteria. And the author should also clearly reveals in their discussion, saying that the result of their review may be limited by not limiting their review to high quality study. So all the author need to do is to clearly reveal every information that they want to disclose within the study design. The second question is to look at whether the investigator implement a comprehensive search and study selection process. A good systematic review or meta-analysis may be limited by selection of a non-representative sample. So in order to reduce selection bias, authors should describe the process where all databases are being searched. So usually the author will include a paragraph saying that they look into different databases, including PubMed, EMBase, Cochrane Control Register, and CINIC, and etc. The author should clearly point out which database they search for. Additionally, they should clearly itemize the inclusion and exclusion criteria of those studies, and even write out the keyword they use to search for these studies. A lot of the time, studies are being searched, but they were limited to English written studies because English is the common language for everyone worldwide, while some systematic review may be conducted by Japanese. They would also include studies written in Japanese, or studies conducted in Chinese may be included in the authors who have a Chinese background. So the authors should clearly point out the language they included in their systematic review, whether it is only English written or it also included other languages. Where should we look for this kind of information? Usually in a study, a systematic review study, and here we are taking this study conducted by Sherrington in 2016. It's a study to look at exercise to prevent falls in older adults, and it's an updated systematic review and meta-analysis. In the method section, and under method, there will be a search strategy section. And what you can see here is in the search strategy, the author clearly point out that they search for 7 electronic databases, including these 7 databases from the year 2010 to 2016. So they clearly describe the time period and the database they use to search for additional articles. They also put the search strategy and the terminology they use in the supplement. So that's a more detailed description of what kind of strategy they use to search for all possible articles. The third question is to look at whether the investigator assess the quality of individual studies with standardized process or tool. And this is important because, as we know from our previous course, it is important to include or to read high quality studies, since garbage in, garbage out. If you only include low quality studies, then it is probably insufficient evidence for you to draw a conclusion. And then the conclusion you draw will be insufficient evidence, and you cannot provide any clinical practice guideline. Therefore, it is important to include high quality studies. And in our previous class, we have talked about the Pedro scale. And the Pedro scale is a scale that is commonly used in systematic review or meta-analysis to assess the quality of studies. Other review articles may use other different kind of scale, and I'm not going to talk about all the scales here today, but Pedro is one of the most commonly used scale that systematic review and meta-analysis use to assess the quality of included studies. just a quick reminder of the Pedro scale. It has 11 items, and the first item is not scored. So the scoring is from item 2 up to item 11. And the scoring criteria, I'm not going to talk it again here, but you can go to our previous lecture and listen through the scoring criteria for the Pedro scale. And if you got a yes in this answer, then you will get 1 point. And if no, it's 0 point. From item 2 to item 11, there will be a total of 10 points. And if a Pedro score greater than 6, we will consider the study as a high quality study. But if a score between 4 and 5, it will be a fair quality study. And the score below 3 would be a low quality study. The author should assess the Pedro score of each study and then discuss whether they included study above 4 or above 8 or included every study possible. The fourth question is, did the investigator provide the detail about the research validity or quality of studies included in this review? Again, just like what we said, after assessing the Pedro score or using other scale of that study, the author should report the level of quality for each article being reviewed in the systematic review. And then the author should specify whether a specific threshold quality score is used for their study inclusion. And then it should be stated along a rationale for its selection. So for example, like what I said, if a systematic review found more than 20 articles or 20 randomized control trial for that topic, the author could probably say, oh, we only want to include high quality study that has a Pedro score greater than 6, and in order to minimize the design bias of that study. And that would be a threshold quality score of 6 points in the Pedro scale that the author used. But if the author can only search for 4 or 5 studies and with pretty low quality, again, the author could specify saying that because of the limited number of research we can search for, we included every study we found. However, because due to the quality of the study, there may be some bias of our result. So what you need to look for is to look for a table, look like this. So for example, this is a table from this study, Quaco et al. In 2008, and the study is to look at robotic assisted therapy upper limb recovery after stroke. And in that study, it could be in the main text or it could be in the appendix area. The author clearly listed the articles that they reviewed. And for each article, these are the Pedro score from 1 to 11. And then for each article, the author will write out the points, saying it's 0 point for question 1, 1 point for question 2, 0 point for question 3, 1 point for question 4, etc. up to 11. And the total score here is 7 for the first study, and the score is 6 for the next study. And so it's a very comprehensive table letting you know that among the articles being reviewed, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. 8 of them have pretty high quality, while 2 of them have fair quality. So that would be a comprehensive table to show in a systematic review or meta-analysis study. For the fifth question, we want to look at whether the investigator addressed some publication bias. What is publication bias? Publication bias reflects the tendency of health science and health policy journal. Editors tend to publish studies based on the direction and statistically significance of the outcome. To make this sentence short, usually editors from journal look for significance. They want some data that has some statistically significant level, which means p smaller than 0.05. So when they publish study, what you will find is that a lot of studies being published in good journal, they usually have some extreme results that has some significance. And that's a publication bias. It's like the editors of the journal tend to like those kind of article. And that means a lot of the time, if a study found no significant differences between 2 or 3 groups, then the journal probably would think this is a boring article and wouldn't want to publish that article. That is a publication bias. Of course, there are less publication bias nowadays since editors in the journal become more general and acceptable to non-significant data. But again, if a data has any significance, it's going to draw more attention to the editor and there's a higher chance to be published. In comparison to the data without any significance, there's less chance of getting published. And that's a publication bias. And because of this publication bias, when we are doing systematic review, it is possible that we only include only data studies that has statistically significance are being included into the review, and that would be a publication bias. So hypothetically, the authors should explicitly address whether gray literature or non-English language publication literature or non-significant literature are being added into the review. So what is gray literature? Gray literature means some study that may not be statistically significant and they are at the gray area of significance or not. That's gray literature. And non-English language publication, as we have mentioned, it could be written in other language, and maybe it's because they don't have statistically significance, so they cannot publish in good English journal, leading to having to publish in other journals. So the author should explicitly talk about this in their article. And there are a lot of ways to reduce publication bias, such as drawing effect size or conduct additional statistics. And there are some like funnel plot or some other plotting method to address this publication bias. However, because of the limited time and we're not going to talk about this. So what you need to do is just to look into the article carefully and see if the author write out any wording saying that they try to look for publication bias and they try different statistic methods to look whether the result changes if they included different type of study. Okay. The sixth question to look for is to see if this is a meta-analysis. Did the investigator use individual subject data in their analysis? This is the hard part, I have to say, because when we are conducting meta-analysis usually may be conducted by using aggregated data or summary data or individual subject data. We have different methods to use when we are performing the statistics for meta-analysis. However, individual subject data are more preferred over a summary score. But usually in an individual original article, we usually can get the summary score instead of individual subject data. So a lot of the time, if an author wants to conduct a meta-analysis, the author will write to the authors of the original article and ask them to provide individual subject data in order to include into their meta-analysis. Again, that causes a lot of problem because when they write to the author, it is possible that the author think it's too much of a trouble, so they decided not to give you the data. Or it is possible that the time is too long ago and the data is no longer there and they cannot find the individual data because they have deleted the data or something. So there are a lot of problems asking for individual subject data. Usually, if an investigator wants to conduct a meta-analysis, he or she will first try to write to the original author and ask for individual data. If individual data is not available, then he or she might just need to use the summary data from the article they found. So if the meta-analysis use individual subject data for their analysis, then that will significantly increase the study validity of that article. Second, we can look for whether subgroup analysis is conducted. Subgroup analysis allows investigators to examine whether an intervention has differential effects. What we mean by subgroup analysis is a lot of the time when we are including the data into meta-analysis, the subject may have different characteristics. For example, when if I'm looking at a topic related to exercise reducing fall risk in elderly adults, but some article may only include elderly adults from 65 to 80, while other articles may include elderly adults greater than 80. Some articles may include elderly adults with cognitive intact, while others may include those has dementia. So it is one way is to pull all the data together and see if there's a general effect. But another way to look at the data is to conduct some group analysis, saying, we are only going to look for the subjects in their age between 65 to 80 versus elderly greater than 80. And then subgroup analysis may provide us additional information saying, maybe aerobic exercise is only effective for elderly between 65 to 80, while it is not as effective for those greater than 80. That will become a very important clinical practice guideline, telling us for those over 80, then probably we shouldn't give them aerobic exercise. Okay, this is just an example, but that's what an meta-analysis can do, and that's why subgroup analysis could be important. Okay, we have gone through briefly about some questions related to the study credibility of a systematic review or meta-analysis. And now I'm going to take you through how to read a forest plot. I have to say meta-analysis and systematic review are really hard articles to read. They are not as simple as we have been talked about. But when you read through that, I would like to give you a brief idea of what's the main point to get from their review. Okay, here is an example of a forest plot. I would say forest plot is one of the most important figure or graph in a meta-analysis study. And there are multiple information containing in the forest plot. And here I'm going to tell you how to read through a forest plot. First of all, we can look at the title. The title says it is a meta-analysis of 7 study, actually it's 9, okay? That examines the effect of anecdotal TDCS versus sham stimulation or motor function in stroke survivors. You don't need to know all the terminology. But what we can see here is, first, through the title, we know the author included 9 studies, which is listed here, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. And then the goal of this review is to look at the effect of this intervention or motor function in stroke survivor. And what we can see here is, from the title, we can get the PICO out of this information. P, participant, will be stroke survivors. I, intervention, will be a nodal TTCS, whatever that is. It's okay if you don't know, but we know the intervention will be that. And then C, control condition, will be sham stimulation. O, for outcome, will be motor function. So as you can see from the example here, a good title will give you the information of PICO, tell you what the authors are interested in. Okay, now let's look at these 9 studies written up here. And what we can see here, first of all, we can look at the effect size calculation. There are multiple ways to calculate effect size. And a lot of the time, the authors would calculate effect size based on the sample size and also the effects that the study show. And what effect size means is more like how significant the result is, or how pronounced the result is. So what we can see here is, with this calculation standard mean difference, for the first study, the effect size is 0.45 for the mean effect size, with a confidence interval from -0.97 to 1.87. So that's the result, the effect size for the first study. And then for each study, the author would do some weighting and recalculating to get the effect size for that study. And with this effect size and confidence interval, we can draw a graph here. And what we can get here is the green square in the middle will be the mean effect size. And then the black line would be the drawing of confidence interval. So as we can see from the example of the first study, we got a mean effect size of 0.45, that would be drawn here. And then the confidence interval ranges from -0.97 up to +1.87. Okay, the next, so that will be the confidence interval. And another thing I would like to mention here is, one thing we can look at the confidence interval is to look whether the confidence interval, the ranges of confidence interval actually crosses 0. The 0 line here means that there's no difference between treatment and control group. And what we can see here, if a positive value means that the effect favors intervention group, while if a score less than 0 means that the result means favoring the sham group, and 0 means there's no difference between groups. So what we can see from this graph is, if a study has a mean of 0.45, then the result actually favors intervention. However, because of the long confidence interval and it crosses 0, it is probably the result favors intervention, but it's still not statistically significant enough. Okay, and we can see from the last figure or last line over here, that's a result from STAGA or the reference 14, and they got a mean effect size of -0.12. So you can see the green square would be less than 0. And then again, the confidence interval crosses 0, so it go across 0. And what we can see here is, among the 9 studies, 7 of them have a confidence interval crosses 0, but 2 shows very pronounced effect, which have confidence interval did not cross 0, which means that their results are statistically significant. And that's the main point of conducting a meta-analysis. As we have mentioned, meta-analysis is especially effective or useful when there are conflicting results. From the 9 studies we get, we found 7 studies that did not show, they only show marginal effect or even no effect in their finding, but 2 studies show very significant finding. And in that case, when we are pulling all the data together, we can draw a conclusion saying based on the result of this study, whether the conclusion seeing the effect is effective or not. So what we can see here is the final figure or the final diamond over here. It is actually the result of this total score. It's a cumulative treatment effect based on the data from all the studies being reviewed. And what we can see here, this diamond is positive, it's larger than 0, suggesting that it's favoring the treatment. And what we need to do is to look whether the confidence interval crosses 0 or not. And what we can see here is the overall effect will be 0.49, so it's positive, but it's not huge, okay? It's little positive effect. And when we are pulling all the data together, the confidence interval is from 0.818 to 0.81. So it's not crossing the 0, means it is statistically significant. So basically, the overall result or the pooling result of those 9 studies telling you that the cumulative effect suggests that the intervention compared to a sham condition is indeed an effective method to improve motor function for patients with stroke. Okay, so now I'm going to give you a chance to read this forest plot. This is a forest plot I got from Seattle in 2012. It's a study aimed to look at the effect of mirror therapy on upper extremity movement for patients with stroke. Okay, so please take a minute to read through this forest plot and give me your conclusion. Pretty easy, right? You don't actually need 1 minute, okay? Let me take you through this again. The goal of this study, PICO, I say it's going to look for stroke patient. It's not written here, but for P, it will be stroke. I, mirror therapy. C, I don't know, but probably conventional physical therapy or conventional occupational therapy. And then O would be upper extremity movement. And what we can see here, several studies are being included. 1 showed negative result in 2010, 2 showed very significant result in 2009, and then a lot of them showed marginal effect. Overall, the subtotal score, what we can find here, the overall effect size would be 0.53, and the confidence interval would be from 0.04 up to 1.01, not crossing 0, suggesting that mirror therapy is indeed an effective method to improve upper extremity motor function in comparison to control condition for stroke survivors. Okay, so that's pretty easy, right? There are a lot of information, but all you need to do is to look at this and you will get the result and know the final finding of this meta-analysis. Okay, in summary, systematic review and meta-analysis can provide the highest level of evidence. So whenever possible, when I'm looking into a new topic, I would search for systematic review and meta-analysis first. But of course, the validity of systematic review and meta-analysis may be limited by several factors which we've been talking about, and it's limited by the comprehensiveness and quality of the included study. So it is important that the authors go through the comprehensive process of reviewing the article, and then we are more able to believe their conclusion. I would say most of the systematic review and meta-analysis are well conducted right now because they have some guidelines. So the authors can do really, really good reviews of the topic they are interested in. But again, it's just a way to let you know how to critically appraise this kind of article. So in case in the future when you encounter a systematic review or meta-analysis, you know how to decide the quality of that review. And that's all for today. And thank you again for taking this course. Again, if you have any questions, please feel free to email me and we can talk through email. Thank you.
Nam ơi, chắc cho cô Nam ơi, chắc cho cô thầy claim host lại nha.
Dạ.
Okay. Hi Alice, are you there? Okay, I'm looking for you. Hi, yes, I will make you a co-host so you can. No, you can unmute.
Thank you.
Yes. So first of all, I have to say thank you for your contribution to the courses, and we are very pleased to have you today with us. I think that's a very interesting topic, especially when we're talking about the meta-analysis and about how can we interpret the result. Very easy and very clear, transparent. So once again, on behalf of so many members, I would like to thank you to you. So now the key question, I will ask everyone if they have the question and I will translate. Dạ, vậy thì mọi người, các anh chị mình có câu hỏi nào cho cô không ạ? Và nếu mình có câu hỏi nào cho cô thì mình có thể đặt câu hỏi ở đây. Mail của cô thì